Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. After over 15 years of being in the field of psychotherapy, Chaix McDonough decided to pivot and shift her skill set after a major life transition. When they moved from Germany back to the US after her husband retired from the military and he bought a dental practice, she decided to press pause on her professional career to help her family transition to civilian life and to assist her husband in growing his business. As she immersed herself in understanding the mindset of owning and running a business, she became more and more interested in combining her strengths of intuitive work and coaching others. From there, she started her coaching business, Coach with Clarity. And now she is the CEO and founder of Coach with Clarity, a business coaching and training company. Lee became credentialed as a coach through the International Coach Federation and now provides ICF accredited continuing coach education for intuitive, heart-centered coaches. She is also the host of the Coach with Clarity podcast and author of the #1 Amazon book, Act on Your Business, Braving the Storms of Entrepreneurship and Creating Success Through Meaning, Mindset, and Mindfulness. And in this week's episode, Lee discusses how she got started, how coaching is different than counseling, things you need to consider if you want to add coaching to your services, why it's important to niche down and define your audience, and do you really need a coaching certification? Lee covers all of these points and much, much more. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hey friend, want to be more comfortable while sitting on the therapy couch? I sure did, and went looking for pants and tops that were soft, wrinkle resistant, and would match just about anything I already had in my closet. And now Zaya Active makes up about 80% of my wardrobe. Would you like to learn more? Head over to my site, lisamustard.com, and click on the Activewear tab. And don't think this is just for women. They have men's and kids' clothes too, and our family is loving the quality, and I am loving the price tags. So head over to my site to check it all out. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and today we are going to be talking about when you are a licensed mental health clinician and you want to pivot a little bit and become a coach. So I'm excited to have Lee on the show today. So welcome, Lee. Please go ahead and tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, hey, Lisa, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here. My name is Chaix McDonough. I am the founder and CEO of Coach with Clarity, which is a business coaching and coach training business. And I am also a licensed clinical social worker. My background is in social work and in public health. And after over 15 years in the field, practicing psychotherapy and being a public health administrator, I transitioned into coaching about 4 years ago. And now I support other therapists, helpers, healers, and creatives who are looking to leverage their training and experience into a profitable and a fulfilling coaching practice.
Very cool. We have, I didn't realize you were in public health as well. I was also in public health at one point in my career. So that's really neat to know that about
yay.
you.
Excellent.
Did you combine the two of therapy and public health, or were they like two separate kind of careers?
A little bit of both. So my training actually was a dual degree program. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill and did a dual program with the schools of social work and public health. So I got 2 master's degrees for the price of one, basically.
Right. Cool.
And then moving forward in my career, well, in large part because my husband was in the Air Force, we moved around a lot and I had a wide range of different jobs. So some of them were more public health oriented. I did work for the City of San Antonio Health Department for a while. And then I transitioned into hospital work. I worked in a neonatal intensive care unit for a few years, which I absolutely loved. My public health background was in maternal and infant health. So that job in particular really did blend both the social work and the public health perspectives that I brought. And then I went into inpatient psychiatric work, outpatient psychiatric work. I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs for several years, doing depression, anxiety, and trauma work with veterans. I spent some time working for the Air Force as a contractor, doing family therapy, counseling, a little bit of everything before moving into more of an administrative role with the Air Force, where I was the liaison for Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany between the wing leadership and all of the helping facilities on base. So mental health, family advocacy, airmen and family readiness, basically all of the organizations that support our airmen and their families. I was the go-between between them and the leaders of the base.
Wow, man, that's amazing. You have such a diverse background and career, and it sounds like you were able to kind of take your passions and what really meant a lot to you and combine it all. And it sounds like a wonderful and fulfilling career. We have a lot in common. That's really, really cool. So how did you decide to move into coaching? Like what happened for you or what? I don't know. Just how did that go? I'm curious.
Yes. Well, so basically it comes down to a major life transition. In 2015, my husband and I made the decision together that it was the right time for him to leave the Air Force. And again, we were in Germany at the time, so we moved back to the United States and we settled in his home state and my chosen home state of North Carolina. And he bought a dental practice here. He is a periodontist by training, so that's a dental specialist.
Mhm.
And he bought a practice in January 1st, 2016. And it was around that time we moved back in June of 2015, and we have two sons. When we moved back, they were 8 and 6. So they had essentially grown up overseas. They were like little Europeans,
Right.
basically. And so I knew that this was going to be a pretty significant transition for all of us. And so I pressed pause on the professional part of my life so that I could really focus on helping my family make that transition. And so for about 9 months, that was my full-time job.
Right.
And then to return to work. I knew I could continue to engage with clients, but I was also feeling called to do something different than mental health. And while all of this was going on, my husband was navigating the very tricky terrain of purchasing a dental practice and all of a sudden not being only a clinician, but also a clinician and a business owner and having to wear both of those hats.
Yeah.
And he is a gifted periodontist. I mean, he is so, so good at what he does. But he had never owned a business before. He didn't go to business school. The Air Force nor dental school prepared him for that. And so he was facing a lot of challenges in that area, and it started to affect his mindset and his belief in himself. And the tension between being a really outstanding clinician and yet feeling like you're falling behind as a business owner is painful.
Yeah.
And I was witnessing it as his spouse, but then also that clinician part of me was saying, you know, I've seen this before. I know what this is. How can I help him and how can I help other people like him who are trying to figure this out and who maybe don't need or want therapy to do so? And so the more I kind of looked into it, I started seeing coaching emerge as a path to do exactly that. So to work on business mindset and business strategy with really talented professionals who want that support and accountability and guidance that comes from coaching. And so that's really was the inspiration behind my choice to start my coaching business. And it's just evolved from there.
Amazing. Like, did you ever have it in the back of your mind, like moving from clinician, mental health clinician to a coach would be like, how did you feel about that? Because I had feelings about that in the beginning, and I was just curious, like, what it was like for you.
Yeah, I had all the feels.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay, we're not alone.
No, not at all. I was so excited. And as I really invested in my coach training, I completed an ICF accredited coach training program and had a lot of peer coaching and practice coaching and starting to see paying clients. I was so excited and I knew in my soul that this was the work I was being called to do. So on one hand, I felt totally aligned and like, yes, I'm all in. But then there was this part of me that had some sadness, even some grief about moving away from therapy and some shame as well. There were many times where I asked myself, what does it say about me that I'm moving away from social work, away from therapy, and towards coaching? Am I abandoning my profession? Am I abandoning my colleagues? Are people going to think differently of me? Are they going to judge me as harshly as I'm judging myself? And so there really was this push-pull between feeling so aligned and so excited to do this work and also having doubt and shame and fear come up and figuring out how to create space for all of that. That was basically the first 18 months of my coaching experience.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty, well, I shouldn't say that would be. I mean, that's been a little bit of what I've felt as I've shifted from, actually saying out loud to people that I want to move away from one-on-one clinical work and get more into podcasting and continuing education and a little bit of coaching. It's weird. I think it's an internal shift, an internal process, but then we externalize it as well. Like we project it onto our peers and folks that we work with. And yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Do you mainly work with mental health clinicians that want to go into coaching, or do you work with anybody who wants to become a coach? Or tell me a little bit about your business?
Yeah, so it was really interesting when I first started coaching 4 or 5 years ago. Like many people, I was like, just give me a client. I don't care who, I don't care what they are, just give me a client. I need a client.
Right.
And so I was definitely a generalist at the beginning, but the more I worked with people who maybe weren't the right fit, it helped me understand who I wanted to serve. And
Sure.
I suspect because of my background in therapy, I naturally attracted a lot of therapists, psychotherapists for sure, but also physical therapists, occupational therapists, other allied health professionals, really helpers and healers of all stripes. I think there was just something that connected me to them to me, and it felt like a natural fit to work with them. And then almost 2 years ago, I created a group coaching program specifically for mental health professionals who wanted to transition into coaching. And I started a Facebook group around that as well called From Therapy to Coaching.
Mm.
And that was like a light bulb just went off. It just made so much sense to me that this has been my experience. I have the training, I have the lived experience, and I have the desire to help other people do this kind of work too.
Mm.
Because the more therapists and helpers I was serving within their businesses, they would then turn around to me and say, this coaching thing, it's really interesting. Tell me more about it. Like, how did you do this? Maybe I want to do this too.
Yeah.
And so it just was this natural evolution of my niche and who I served to focus on healers and helpers and mental health therapists who were interested in starting a coaching practice. So it went from more general coaching to business coaching for helpers and healers to coaching, helping, and healers in their journey of becoming coaches as well. And that's really what led to stepping full into Coach with Clarity as my brand. I now have a membership program that is an ICF accredited continuing coach education program, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
Big plans in the future for more training possibilities as well. So it definitely evolved over time. And so it got more narrow and more narrow. And now I think it's starting to widen a little bit more as well, so that I'm attracting coaches of all stripes and of all backgrounds. But really, the piece that unites them is a deep desire to serve. So a core value of service coupled with desire to bring their intuition into their work as well, so that they want to find that happy marriage between external data and internal wisdom. That's really at the core of the work that I do with coaches as well.
I really like how you phrase that. That makes a lot of sense, because I think sometimes when people say intuitive coach, intuitive healer, intuitive, I'm like, what in the world does that mean? So
Yeah.
I like how you have explained that. That makes so much sense. So much sense. And I think that as clinicians, I think we do that. That's kind of what we do is we know the data, we know the theories, we know the techniques and tools, but we also are using our gut and our intuition and pacing and joining and a lot, all those things. So I think that if any, therapists out there are listening and they're wondering about coaching and how do I do both or both,
Mhm.
and is that, do you help therapists with that, or what do you suggest with that? I know that's a big question. A lot of people have questions about that.
Yes, no, let's dive in. And I
Yeah.
do help people with that because I feel really passionate about bringing more therapists, mental health professionals, and allied health professionals into the coaching field,
Okay.
because we are so uniquely qualified to do this kind of work.
Mhm.
As many people know, coaching is a self-regulated industry. And what that means is that there is no federal or state licensing or requirements for coaching. Anyone can call themselves a coach with little to no training. They can hang out a shingle and start coaching tomorrow. And so there's a fairly low bar to entry for this profession. And it falls on the consumer to do their research, do their homework, and ensure that when they are working with a coach, they're working with someone that knows what they're doing. And because of our training as therapists and because of our natural ability to foster relationships with clients and build rapport and guide them through the change process, I really believe that we are in a perfect position to strengthen the coaching profession. Now, coaching is a different approach.
Mm.
And while there's some overlap in the skills that we use and the tools that we use, there's a different lens that we view the client relationship through as a coach versus a therapist. And that's why I believe that every coach, whoever you are, would benefit from coach training. Therapists may or may not need a formal certified coach training program, but even they would benefit from coach specific training to really familiarize themselves with that approach and to figure out how to use the experience and training they have as a therapist in a coaching way.
Gotcha.
And so that's what I do. That's what I love to do within the membership with private coaching, is help therapists figure out how to leverage all of that into a coaching business.
Awesome. That sounds really, really great. Hey guys, I want to tell you about a group I've created on Facebook. It's called the Talk Therapist Lounge, and it's a place where we talk therapists can find podcast guest opportunities. That's right. If you're a licensed talk therapist and you are looking to grow your reach and visibility, this group may be a place for you to start. I'm working to bring in podcast hosts who are wanting to interview licensed clinicians that can share their expertise and knowledge with their audiences. Why should you be a guest? That's a really good question. Let me tell you, people are crawling all over the internet, listening to podcasts and watching videos on mental health issues. My mission is to help spread the word about mental health treatment and help lower the stigma around mental health. And to do that, we need to get you guys out there sharing your knowledge, sharing your wisdom, and how you help people live their best lives. And it may help grow your brand and visibility and possibly help you gain new clients. I also share how to create a podcast guest one sheet and tips and ideas for getting yourself booked on shows. So will you come join us? Look for the Talk Therapist Lounge on Facebook. I hope to see you there. I know that you and I had talked about some of the challenges that therapists have in the beginning of kind of like wrapping their brain around how to even get started. Can you share just a few ideas or a few tips for us?
One thing that I find is that there's a deep desire to serve people and to broaden impact, which I love, and I want to help therapists do that. But first and foremost, therapists need to clearly understand the differences between therapy and coaching. And certainly seeing it on paper and seeing the definition is one thing, but also understanding how we apply skills and tools and strategies differently. So being very clear on how their approach to client work differs as a therapist versus a coach. And then in line with that, also clarifying the difference in who they serve, how they serve them, and the end result. So I'm a huge advocate for therapists, particularly licensed professionals who want to coach. We need to be explicit about the differences between the services we offer at every level. So both in who we serve, our marketing messages, our business entities, the more we can keep things separate and really view it as two separate businesses, two separate approaches, two separate client populations, that's going to serve us well. And it's also going to keep us on strong ethical footing so that we are not using coaching as a way to circumvent state licensing boards so that we're really just providing therapy across state lines.
Right.
Like, that's not what coaching is. It is its own profession with its own core competencies, its own code of ethics. So if we can familiarize ourselves with that and really ground our coaching work in that, then it just puts us on stronger footing moving forward.
Awesome. That's really helpful. I know that's like the first question that always pops up, in the groups is about, how do I do this? Where do I start? What do I need to just talk to my board about? And what I find is that the boards really aren't going to tell you much of anything because they're not going to guide you to be a coach. They are really just thinking about you as a therapist in your state.
They are. And actually, even more than that, they are thinking about the public. They are there. Their charge is to protect the public.
Right.
And I appreciate that. I want the boards there doing that because we don't want unlicensed professionals providing therapy services to people. Where it gets confusing is that coaching is not therapy. And many state boards don't have a full understanding of what coaching is. And why would they? Because that's
Right.
not their charge. Their charge is to ensure that psychotherapeutic guidelines are being followed. So I understand why boards are confused and
Mhm.
may not be in a position to accurately advise licensed professionals who are asking about coaching.
Right.
One thing that I have noticed is that when a therapist engages with their board about, hey, can I coach? It's really helpful and it results in better outcomes if they're specific about what they are doing as a coach versus what they're not. So if you're going to your state board and saying, hey, I'm going to start coaching, I'm not providing therapy, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, I'm not providing assessments, I'm not doing testing, that's fine. But then what are you doing? You're
Right.
not really giving the board anything to go on. And so their default response is going to be, yeah, but you're still licensed. So this is confusing. We don't get it.
Right.
Versus if you go to your board and you say, yes, I'm a licensed therapist, but I have this coaching practice where I work with small business owners and entrepreneurs, and we're creating marketing plans and we're creating business plans and I'm helping them grow their business, whatever it is. All of a sudden, I'm telling them what I am doing. I'm clearly differentiating it from a psychotherapeutic process. And then they can kind of wrap their heads around it and at least have more information to factor into their guidance for you. And again, they're not familiar with coaching. So it kind of falls on us to ensure that we understand what it is, that we can communicate it, and that we're grounding our actions in both our therapy profession code of ethics and also the International Coaching Federation code of ethics as well.
Gotcha. That makes so much sense. Tell them what you are doing versus telling them, oh yeah, and hey, I'm going to do a coaching thing over here. They're going to it. I love that. I mean, and that's how, it should be. It's lead with what you're going to be doing, not leaving it up for, in the air for them to decide and tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. That's
Exactly.
really, really helpful. What other tips or ideas do you have for therapists that are considering, jumping into coaching as they get started?
I think the very first thing that I would recommend an aspiring coach to do is to get clear on the who, the what, and the how of their coaching business. So, who they want to serve. And when we talk about that, yes, you can start from a demographically oriented perspective. So, if you're looking at age, sex, profession, the kind of data that you'd find on this on a census form. That's one place to start. But then I would encourage you to go deeper, go into the psychographics and really think about the inner life of your ideal client. What matters most to them, what their core values are, what their deepest desires are, what their fears are, because that psychographic information is just as, if not more important than the demographic information when it comes to really clarifying who we want to serve. And that's going to help us then communicate who we are and what we do to our ideal clients and to our referral sources. So, starting with the who, getting really clear on that, and then getting clear on the process of coaching, what it looks like from kind of a big picture, bird's eye perspective to coach with you. And I recognize for new coaches that you may not know that yet. That oftentimes happens in the process of coaching. And the more clients you work with, the more you'll ground down into your own process and approach. So it's okay to start with a hypothesis, to talk
Mhm.
about what you plan to do. And if it shifts over time, that's totally appropriate and happens. But when we're talking with clients, they're going to want to know what coaching looks like and what they can expect. So we need to be prepared to answer those questions. So if we can get clear on who we serve on the general process, and then we can be clear about expected outcomes. So, what does that ideal client want most? What will
Mhm.
it look like for them after they've experienced coaching with us? And then, how does our process and how does working with us as their guide get them to there? If you can articulate all of that, then you've got a really solid marketing message. And you've also got kind of the pillars around which you can build your business. So that's where I would start, is getting really, really clear on the who, the what, and the how, allowing that to inform your marketing. And then you can go out there and start talking about what you do. And there's a million different channels to do that. But
Yeah.
first and foremost, you want to be clear in your messaging.
Very cool. Oh my gosh, it gets my brain just like going in so many different directions. I love it. I'm just so excited about this conversation. I think it just gets my wheels spinning. What areas or what niches or niches or however you want to say it, are you seeing are kind of hot right now for folks to kind of coach into, if that makes sense, coach into, but
That does make sense.
Yeah.
Yes. So I certainly am seeing a lot of people focus on business coaching,
Mm.
which makes a lot of sense because as professionals, we also understand, especially those of us who have private practice experience, we know what it looks like to run a business and everything that goes into that. So I'm definitely seeing business coaching on the rise. I'm also seeing health and wellness coaching on the rise as well. And for therapists, this is tricky ground
Mm.
because, again, we are healthcare providers by training. We understand a lot of that, but health and wellness coaching is very different than providing healthcare. And so that's an area that when therapists move in there, it's even more important to be crystal clear about the differences between your role as a healthcare provider and your role as a health and wellness coach. And we want to be mindful of the state laws and regulations around the provision of healthcare services to make sure that we're not overstepping them when we are providing health and wellness coaching. So just a little caveat for
Yeah.
my healthcare professionals out there. So certainly health and wellness coaching, business coaching, and then I think just general life coaching as well. And my goodness, right now, I can't think of a time where we need more life coaches out there helping people understand how to navigate through challenging life experiences and how to build their resilience and find the joy, even when we are facing down global pandemics or
Right.
even just smaller challenges within the home or within the workplace as well.
Yeah, I think those are great. Thank you for sharing, your insight into what you're seeing. So if folks are listening and they want to learn more about how they can work with you, what do you recommend? How should they find you, get a hold of
Yes.
you?
Well, you can certainly head over to my website, coachwithclarity.com, and that's where you'll find information about my podcast, Coach with Clarity. So lots of good information on
Yeah.
that show and a great, no cost option to start building your own coaching education. And then at the website, there's also information about the Coach with Clarity membership, which again is my ICF accredited continuing coach education program, where we look at both building your coaching mastery and your business mastery as well, because you need both to
Yeah.
have a successful business. And then if you're interested in one-on-one work, there's information at the website as well. And I'm also fairly active over on Instagram at Coach with Clarity.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to put all that in the show notes. But just
Oh,
to
thanks.
just to clarify, so
Yes.
if there's therapists listening today and they think, I would like to work with you you said it's a membership, like a group
Mhm.
option,
Correct.
that would be enough for them right now. They don't need to, you wouldn't think they would need to go and get like an ICF certification. Your membership should give them what they need to jump into.
I think the membership is a great first step, especially
Okay.
if you're still kind of exploring coaching, getting your feet wet. And
Okay.
as you do more of the work, you may find that you want to pursue an ICF credential. I did, and I have no regrets about it.
Mhm.
I will say, though, that in the end, whether or not to pursue an ICF credential comes down, I think, to two things.
Mm.
One is your own personal desire and how important it is for you to seek that certification, and also the personal growth and development that comes along with completing a coach training program.
Yeah.
I tell you what, nothing in my life has allowed me to grow as a human being like my coach training program
That's
did. I
awesome.
mean, 100%. So that's one factor.
Yeah.
The second thing to consider is how important is a coaching credential to your ideal client? There are some niches where having an ICF credential is really important. I think executive coaching and corporate coaching, an ICF credential is kind of the gold standard. So if you are thinking about pursuing a coaching career in those areas, you may want to pursue a formal ICF credential. But if you're doing business coaching, life coaching, health and wellness coaching, that credential may not be super important to your ideal client. They may resonate more with your past training, with the message that you're sending, and the trust that you're building with them, that you can support them. So based on that, I would say the membership is probably the best place for most therapists to start. It is some formal coaching education, but it's wrapped within this really supportive community of other coaches who are going through it with you.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm so excited to have learned all about your coaching program and to have had you on the show. This has been a lot for me to consider as I, think about, pivoting and moving. Because, I say it all the time, like I love connecting with our peers. I love growing relationships. And I do this podcast because you guys, I want to learn just as much about all these really cool things that our peers are doing. So thank you so much, Lee, for coming onto the show and being here. This has just been great. Thank you.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine. Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content. And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.